Here are 5 questions that theists do not want to answer. 1. If bears aren't friends and will kill me, why so friend-shaped? 2. Why does my nose run, but my feet smell? 3. Why did Season 8 of Game of Thrones end like that? And why would a god let that happen? Hello critters, welcome back to my channel where we talk about religious deconstructing and reconstructing something beautiful in its place. I think a tagline for this channel is also going to be trying to make friends with the monsters in the abyss, because that's what we're trying to do. Today, I'm responding to this video.
Here are 5 questions that atheists do not want to answer.
Listen. I do. I'm an atheist. I do want to answer these questions because I love talking about these topics. They don't always have to have clean-cut answers, and that's okay. It's still a great discussion. We love mystery on this channel. Chat, if you love experiencing the mystery of the universe with childlike wonder and being able to live in the gray, smash that fucking like button. I know these questions and the way he's asking them and like the short-form content are like gotcha questions. I don't think he's sincerely asking, but today I'm going to sincerely answer them because they're great questions. They are. I love them, and I want to humanize atheists as much as possible while having interesting convos and exploring ideas. And if you have ideas different than what I explain in this video, I'd love to hear about it. I'm not answering these as like a dunk on religion. I'm an atheist, but I'm like pro-spirituality for humans. At this point, I'm not like the new age atheism type. I don't even like Richard Dawkins. Fuck that guy. I'll even start a rumor that he kicks puppies to prove that I'm not with that guy. Religion isn't for me. It's not for a lot of us. But I understand that it serves a purpose for some people. This is just to have fun discussions about psychology, philosophy, science, and more. So let's hear his first question.
Number 1, where did the universe come from? We know that everything in the universe has a cause, but what caused the universe? What was the first cause?
Okay, so we have to address this from a philosophical standpoint and also a scientific standpoint. This argument comes from Thomas Aquinas from his writing The 5 Ways. And listen, it's actually a really intelligent argument given the time and the knowledge that he had to work with. I mean, if I was in 1200s Italy, I probably would have believed the earth is flat and that Brussels sprouts carried evil spirits. He's far more intelligent than I am. To stillman this argument a bit, because it's more than just everything has a cause, Aquinas basically argues that everything we observe and everything that begins to exist or undergoes a change has a cause. Nothing can cause itself because it would require to exist prior to itself, and there can't be an infinite regression of causes. There can't be a never-ending chain of dependencies. So this first uncaused cause that we go all the way back to must be metaphysically necessary to exist, like transcend time, capable of producing contingent things, and those qualities we would attribute to a god. And this is a super intelligent line of thinking, sincerely. Like, it's great. However, with what we know now, we know that this argument doesn't really hold up. Even Aquinas himself admits that it could very well be that the universe has just always existed and that it's not possible for things to not exist. And a lot of atheists believe this too as a possibility. And that would be a fine explanation. He just obviously doesn't believe that because he was Christian, Book of Genesis. But really, we have no reason to think things haven't just always existed. Also, I'm not a philosopher, just answering as little old me here, but it seems to me this argument commits the deadly fallacy of special pleading. Everything must have a cause, except for God, because I put it in the definition of God. Also, even if given that the universe does have a first cause, there's no reason in this argument that it has to be a God. It could be a myriad of things. That are just really hard for our brains to currently grasp with our level of knowledge, so we just say, ooh, God. But in 1,000 years, people may look back at us and laugh, or because they have the answer. But I do think we know enough about science now to know that maybe this argument doesn't hold up anymore. He started the video assuming that we know everything has a cause, but we don't. That's just incorrect, and it's kind of begging the question. If you only look through the lens of your own human experience, like Aquinas, because that's all he had, because it was the 1200s, sure, it seems like everything has a cause. But we're talking about physics here, and in physics, especially when you get quantum, shit gets whack. Like, stuff goes against human intuition all the time. So you're gonna be wrong if you're only thinking in terms of how things work in your daily life. You're probably operating only in Newtonian physics, which means you're gonna be wrong, because Newtonian physics is super useful for big scale things like planes, spaceships, understanding galaxy movement, but it only goes so far. We can't watch the apple fall far from the tree with world-renowned scientist Miss Charlie XCX and believe that we understand how the universe began. An apple falling from a tree is not the same as the laws of physics governing the first few milliseconds after the Big Bang. When you get to the precision of quantum mechanics, Newtonian physics breaks down. It's not that exact, and it's a set of separate laws entirely. We know that truly spontaneous and random things happen in quantum physics. And I'm not a physicist or an astrophysicist. I can't explain this stuff to you, but I can certainly try in vague terms to explain to you what I have read from experts. Because sincerely, we don't even know if nothing can truly exist. Matter pops in and out of existence spontaneously in a vacuum. The rotation of quarks has been found to be random, like truly random. I'm not an astrophysicist again, so let me just give you some sources actually before I make a fool of myself. I recommend the paper, Why Is There Something Instead of Nothing? It's a pretty accessible scientific paper. I also recommend Anything by Katie Mack. She's an astrophysicist and science communicator. She's really good at explaining the Big Bang. And there's a Crash Course podcast series with Katie Mack about the universe and the origins of it in astrophysics and stuff. Highly recommend that. Very accessible. Good starting points. Also, when this question gets asked, again, it's very much a gotcha question, or an attempted gotcha question, which is kind of the question he's alluding to. How the fuck did the Big Bang happen? I gotta be honest, I've never seen a Christian properly understand what the Big Bang Theory is. I see videos almost daily of Christians saying stuff like, oh, you're so stupid, you think something came from nothing, and there's just an explosion, and then all of a sudden there was something. That's crazy. Well, no, that's not what the Big Bang is. I've never seen a Christian debunk the Big Bang while actually understanding what it really is. They always misrepresent it and strawman it, and they're just wrong. And I'm not saying that this is what this guy is doing. I'm just using this as a segue into what I've seen a lot. So this is not directed to him. This is a tangent. The Big Bang Theory is simply the furthest point back that we can look and know anything. We know that about 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was in a hot, dense state, and then there was a rapid expansion. We can't see past that point, past that hot, dense state with our current technology. So that's the moment where physics and time as we know them now begin. But it's not a theory about the creation or beginning of everything. It's a theory about how far back we can trace the universe using physics and can know anything. So again, we know that 13.8 billion years ago, there's a rapid expansion from a hot, dense state, but we don't know anything that was before that. We can't see beyond that point because of how dense and hot it was. That's where the laws of physics as we know them break down. So the Big Bang Theory is the limit on what we can currently understand about time and space behaving the way they do now. It's just a thing we know happened a long time ago. It is not a claim about the ultimate beginning of everything. So when Christians say, the Big Bang is just everything came from nothing, that's not it. The Big Bang Theory marks the beginning of the universe as we know it. We don't even know if there was a literal beginning, or if the universe existed in some other form before that. We also don't know if nothing is truly possible, like I said earlier. So asking this question in general may be silly. Also, it's very important to understand when talking about the Big Bang Theory, that when someone says theory in science, it's not just an idea or hypothesis like we know it colloquially. The actual definition of a scientific theory is very different than how we use theory in everyday language. A scientific theory is the highest level of achievement that a concept in science can achieve. I guarantee you people who discredit the Big Bang Theory don't even know what a scientific theory actually is. Let's Google it right now, actually. A scientific theory is an explanation of an aspect of the natural world that can be or that has been repeatedly tested and has corroborating evidence in accordance with a scientific method. The meaning of the term scientific theory, as used in disciplines of science, is significantly different than the common vernacular usage of theory. In everyday speech, theory can imply an explanation that represents an unsubstantiated guess or speculative guess, whereas in a scientific context, it most often refers to an explanation that has already been tested and is widely accepted as valid. Yeah, so it's not just like a casual, I have a theory, Bush did 9/11, kind of like everyday conversation. And that misunderstanding causes a lot of confusion. So too long didn't read. We don't know if the universe has a cause, and the Big Bang Theory is not trying to explain that. It's okay to not know things yet. If we accepted that, like, just because we don't know the answer to something right now means that it can't possibly be anything, we never would have developed, like, medicine or the internet. All right, next question.
Number 2, how can there be objective morality without a God? If everything is left up to the individual to decide, then nothing is right or wrong. Everything is just what you think is right and wrong.
Okay, so this one has an easy answer, but it's a hard to swallow one. I don't think there's an objective morality. And I can hear the comments now because I get them all the time. Oh my God, you're such a heathen. You believe there's no such thing as objective morality. So if I murder someone, that's okay? That means that's the right thing to do. So, girl, you're still thinking in objective morality terms. No, it doesn't mean that it's right. Christians also believe in subjective morality. They just don't really like to admit it because it's uncomfortable. But just because something is uncomfortable does not mean that it's not true. Comfort has zero bearing on whether something is actually true. And I'm not saying this is true across the board, but for the most part, when you listen to arguments for objective morality from Christians, it's largely out of convenience and comfort. Like, it's uncomfortable to think that there isn't an objective morality because we're humans and we love, like, the security of knowing that there's, like, a set of rules for us. And it's terrifying to think that we have to figure it out for ourselves. And that sucks. But I think it's true. I think we live in an uncaring universe. And like I said a minute ago, Christians will claim they have an objective morality, but it's, to me, clearly not objective because, one, it comes from a book that is subjectively interpreted. Like, could God not have thought of a more objective way to pass down his objective morality? Like, maybe he should have just come told us himself. And we see the consequences of that. If it was so objective, there wouldn't be literally thousands and thousands of denominations at each other's throat for all of human history. You'd expect to see a clear moral system that everyone agrees on, but based on like culture, time, and like even within Christianity, you don't. Everybody thinks their Bible interpretation is the correct one. People have been thinking that for thousands of years, but you think you're the one who finally got it right out of thousands of years of people trying to figure this shit out. Everyone else thought that just as wholeheartedly as you do. And if morality is based on God's opinion, which seems to shift depending on the circumstance, I wouldn't call that objective either. It's more like divine subjectivity. God's, morality standards change constantly. I mean, he commits genocide himself at points. So you can claim to have an objective morality, but I don't think you do, not as a Christian. But, within subjective morality, we do have some frameworks that we can use to try and create a morality for ourselves that makes us able to run society. And while none of them are perfect and have issues, because that's the universe, dude, we're just flawed monkeys trying to figure this shit out on a rock, they can be useful. We don't have to hold one system as the one divine true answer. We can pull together what works best for society. For example, utilitarianism. Summed up briefly, this framework is about minimizing suffering and maximizing societal happiness. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. And while this system has its flaws when you get into it with the nitty-gritty and like the theoretical, I do sincerely find that it's better for a society than to go by the rules laid out in the Bible. If we see two worlds, I believe the one where we adhere to utilitarianism over the Bible will produce more human thriving, even though there are very valid criticisms of this system. There's no perfect system. I would rather create a society where people know how their actions affect others and act accordingly than hope they just continue to believe that the policeman in the sky is going to keep them in line and hope they don't go crazy when they realize that that's not true. But also, the point of this argument is to point to an objective morality given from God, but morality has existed long before God allegedly gave us the rules to live by in the Hebrew Bible and on. We have evidence that ancient humans cared for the disabled and elderly because we evolved with social cohesion as our advantage. There are evolutionary reasons for us to evolve empathy and morality. If it has to come from God, why does it predate the rules that he gave us? I'm going to answer the next two questions at the same time because I feel like my answer will just kind of cover both.
Number 3, why should we assume that there's an objective truth? Without a God that sets laws and order, shouldn't everything just be completely random? Number 4, how can we trust ourselves? If all of our thoughts are based on survival according to evolution, there's no necessity for them to be based on truth.
We can know that some things are true, but not in like the perfect absolute sense that like people hope and want for because it's simpler and easier and more existentially comfortable. There's a book called The Case Against Reality. It's not a perfect book, but it has lots of great takeaways. It's become clear through our understanding of psychology, evolution, and sociology that evolution wires our brains for survival and not perceiving objective reality. Our brains hide things from us so we could focus on one thing at a time. but you have an entire subconscious cognitive process happening all the time that you don't even know about and you have no control over. Read some good old Carl Jung to learn more about this. The unconscious is necessary for our brains to function, or we would be overloaded with information all the time. And our brains are wired to be inclined towards certain biases that make us more likely to survive over seeing objective truth. I mean, think of like groupthink and tribalism. It would have been more advantageous for our ancient ancestors to live in large, bonded, tight-knit groups that go rah, rah, rah together than to understand the nuances and complexity of the other groups around them. Or like cherry picking and confirmation bias. I read a really good paper on this. I'll read a little bit from it. From a practical perspective, confirmation bias makes sense as a heuristic for modifying our mental models of the world around us. Most of the knowledge we have is shared amongst people and is in fact true. This applies to things as simple as the sky is blue, or things that are tossed up will return down. As such, if we are confronted with someone telling us otherwise, it is in our best interest to reject their claims. In this way, confirmation bias, similarly to other cognitive biases, can offer an evolutionary advantage. This would explain why it has persisted over time. In fact, we see these cognitive biases in non-human animals as well. For instance, optimism bias, the belief that we ourselves are less likely to experience a negative event, is conserved in almost every animal, ranging from primates all the way down to ants. And our brains do things like filling in gaps where we see empty spots in patterns. That's how we see optical illusions. Our brains are pattern detecting machines, but evolution kind of geared us more towards over detecting patterns than under detecting them, because those who were a little jumpy and saw patterns where they weren't actually there were still more likely to survive. It doesn't matter if you're seeing an objectively true pattern. If you see a pattern and think there's a predator and err on the side of caution, you're going to be more likely to survive. We know all of this through decades of studying human psychology, and this includes religious people. Just because you're religious does not mean you're excluded from these biases. If God really did have an ultimate truth for us, maybe religious people would be less inclined to have these biases, but it's simply not the case. In fact, a great example is research done by the University of Utah Medical School, where they put believing Mormons into MRI machines while having them read scripture and listen to worship music and stuff, and see what part of their brains lit up. They told the participants to signal to them when they felt the Holy Spirit moving, and when the participants signaled, the same parts of their brain that lit up were the same parts that light up with like sex, drug, addiction, good secular music, etc. Our brains are wired to just chase whatever brings us dopamine, but the really interesting part is they gave these Mormons 6 quotes to read. They told them 3 of them were from just non-Mormon Christians, but then the other 3 were from Mormon leaders. They asked them to rank how much they felt the Holy Spirit move whenever reading the quotes, and across the board, they ranked the Mormon quotes higher than the regular Christian ones. But the twist was, literally all of the quotes were from C.S. Lewis. There is an inherent in-group bias in religious people, as proven in data, that is entirely a product of just their brains, not actually having anything to do with what the content is, if it's divinely inspired or whatever. And non-religious people are prone to the same bias because we're all human. And in fact, the concept he's describing in The Case Against Reality of fitness over truth, that model, is exactly what religion is. That's exactly what creating gods is. It's a product of our biological biases and us coping in ways that don't necessarily line up with objective reality. Humans need religion, myths, rituals, meaning, because evolution selects for comfortable delusions and tribalism. It's an uncomfortable truth, as we've discussed previously, but that doesn't mean it's less true. We are social creatures. And again, this is not exclusive to religious people. That's just the topic right now. Non-religious people are prone to these biases as well. That's why they fall for, cults if they're not religious cults, for example. Evolution favors us bonding together over shared myths and easing existential dread with the belief in God, using religion to cope with the fear of mortality. I mean, the knowledge that we're gonna die is freaking paralyzing, dude. Those of us who have stared into the abyss a little too long and didn't like what looked back without the opioid of religion know that better than anybody. Nihilism was like truly the hardest thing I've ever been through. So yeah, humans developed religion because it helps us function in spite of that dread. It's a concept called terror management theory. Humans are prone to developing systems of belief and investing in systems of belief that make us feel like we're a part of something bigger that'll continue after us in order to soothe the anxiety that comes with being aware of mortality. So when people ask, how can you know what's true? Or how can you trust yourself? The answer is, Despite all this, humans are pretty smart, and we've become aware of these biases and have created some ways to try to minimize them that clearly work. We know humans are biased, we know our perception is flawed, so we've built some systems that try to account for those flaws. Like, for example, that's what the scientific method is. In the scientific method, you follow steps to conduct an experiment, and it offers like a structured and reliable way to create an experiment. It promotes drawing conclusions on hard data and observation and repeated testing. We also have other systems in science that help eliminate bias. For example, in order for something to meet the standard of a scientific theory, it must be testable, repeatable, and most importantly, falsifiable, meaning that there must be experiments you can do to try to prove it wrong. We've also created methods of experimentation that help eliminate bias, such as placebo studies, where you give someone like a sugar pill and don't tell them like if they got the sugar pill, the real pill, to make sure there's an observable difference between the people in the experiment, the two groups. We also have double-blind studies, randomized controlled trials, systems of rigorous peer review. We have entire fields of math dedicated to correctly interpreting data, so I could go on. And it works really well. I mean, look around. We've eradicated diseases, but not if RFK Jr. and Donald Trump have anything to say about that. We've been to space. We've invented cell phones. If you don't trust science, then give me back that Allegra you take every pollen season when the trees kick your ass, and give me back the vaccine that eradicated polio. Give me back the Wendy's french fries that stay crispy after getting cold, and give me back Among Us. We can't always see reality as humans, but we can try to work through that limitation with systems that eliminate bias. Also, as another example of systems created to try and eliminate these biases and get to the root of truth, we also have like formal logic and informal logic in philosophy that test to make sure ideas and thoughts don't contain like fallacies and that they're true and mistake-free as best as we can. We can use equations to make sure that human bias doesn't creep into this exploration of truth. Our brains didn't evolve to detect that stuff, we're just monkeys with tools. But still, look at what we figured out. It's pretty incredible.
And number 5, why is every culture so focused on a god? If God doesn't exist, why is everyone so insistent that there is one?
I would like to introduce you guys to a logical fallacy called argumentum ad populum. It's a fallacy of relevance, meaning how many people believe something is not relevant to its truthfulness. For a long time, most people believed the Earth was the center of the universe, but just because that's what most everyone believed didn't make it true at that time. Just like Marvel movies have been wildly popular, but that doesn't make them anything other than trash, garbage movies. Despite this being, like, not a great argument for God, it is an interesting discussion, like, super interesting discussion for psychology and sociology and stuff. And it's one that can be answered. Religion fulfills a lot of psychological needs we develop to need as humans, and our brains are just wired towards it. Evolution does not select for the best traits or like the perfect organism. It just creates organisms with traits that are good enough to keep them alive long enough to make babies. Early in human history, our development of imagination and theoretical thinking gave us an advantage because it allowed us to create and to bond. And this naturally led to us becoming aware enough to conceptualize things like art, death, and things that are bigger than us. So humans see other humans right in front of them. So with this imagination that evolved, it's not hard to then make the step to even greater humans or the greatest human, gods. Evolution also wired us to hyperactively detect agency in things. It's for the same reason that humans are such anxious critters. Humans who are jumpier detected more threats, even false positives were more likely to stay alive, like we discussed earlier. So humans detected more creatures with agency, including false positives, because they were more likely to detect predators and threats. So we're inclined to project agency onto things a little too much. Religion also encourages social cohesion in ancient humans living in villages. Humans bonded and shared myths. Closer social bonding meant stronger villages that were more likely to survive. There's no more intense way to encourage bonding than through shared myths about shared gods. You can also encourage cooperation through the policeman in the sky phenomenon. If you think someone is always watching, you're less likely to harm others. One of the most powerful way religion serves humans psychologically is what we discussed earlier, terror management theory, which proposes that humans cope with the fear of death by creating and maintaining cultural worldviews that provide meaning and self-esteem and reduces existential anxiety. Humans also need meaning and purpose to be healthy. Humans that were fueled by meaning and purpose were much more likely to fight to survive, and religion and gods are an easy ticket to that. So, humans are prone to creating gods because we share a common ancestry that left certain proclivities and needs in our very DNA. We all love storytelling. We have anxiety that needs to be soothed. Ultimately, we're just silly monkeys trying our best pretending that we know what's going on, but that doesn't mean that religion is true or that gods are real. It just means that flawed mammals evolved flawed survival strategies and accidentally evolved psychological needs that just so happen to be easily fulfilled by religion and gods. And just because we're inclined to religion and gods doesn't mean we're beholden to them forever or that they're necessary. You can foster a tolerance for the unknown, learn more about your core values and interests, and develop healthy coping skills. You can build a spiritual life outside of religion. I experience spiritual awe much more frequently now that I appreciate the magic and mystery of the universe as it is. I'm able to be closer with people in my life and understand them more intimately than I ever could before with my new perspective on how humans are and how we got to be the way that we are. I can be more in tune with myself and the earth that I call home. Even on my worst days, I can now cultivate an appreciation for every breath I'm taking. The lows I experience are more intense now, but so are the highs, and both the lows and the highs bring a richness to my life now that make it an experience worth having. Even the days where I experience heartbreak or depression or nihilistic existential dread, at least I can know that I'm a piece of the universe that became aware enough to even experience those things, and that's pretty fun. I believe the perfect summary of what I've discussed here as an atheist would be this quote from Frederick Backman in his book Anxious People. The truth? There isn't any. All we've managed to find out about the boundaries of the universe is that it hasn't got any. And all we know about God is that we don't know anything. So the only thing a mom who was a priest demanded of her family was simple: that we do our best. We plant an apple tree today, even if we know the world is going to be destroyed tomorrow. We save those we can. I am both a silly little monkey on a rock flying through space. I'm full of existential dread, but I'm also a part of the universe the same way a wave is part of the ocean. I'm the universe experiencing and being, and I may not like that I came into existence being able to ask questions I'll never get an answer to, but at least talking about the questions is pretty cool and fun. And as much as theists like to dehumanize atheists and say my worldview is depressing and meaningless, I'm just going to be thankful that I got a turn in existence to even hear them say that, and that I get to have these discussions with cool people like you. Being a human is pretty rad because I even get to ask these questions. Being a tree would be pretty cool, I think, but a tree can't ask these questions. So now that you're here and you can ask these questions, what kind of questions do you want to ask? And what kind of questions do you want to talk about with people? We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years and we still haven't figured it out. So let's keep contributing.